This is a comparison I made between 5 different screen recording softwares. I've been using Fraps lately and it hasn't been updated once this year except for a small bug fix, so I did a little test between 4 new ones and Fraps to see which one performed better, which was the better image quality, and also which used least disk space. 5 programs that we're gonna review are DXTORY, Fraps, Action, BANDICAM, and MSI AFTERBURNER. The following setup that I've used is all games are recorded in 1080p in 30 frames and with the basic codecs that comes with the screen recording software. So if they have their own codecs, we'll use that one or the one that has been set up standardly. The following benchmarks that we'll use is the Final Fantasy XIV benchmark and the Resident Evil 6 benchmark. When I run the Final Fantasy XIV benchmark without any recording software, I have a score of 9,684. DXTORY had a score of 8,911, which means it only had an 8.31% performance drop compared to the vanilla test. Fraps had a score of 4,741, which is a whopping 86.53% performance drop compared to the vanilla. Action had a 45.64% performance drop with a score of 6,085. BANDICAM had a score of 7,221, and that means that's a 29.13% performance drop. And MSI AFTERBURNER had a score of 4,825, which is a 66.97, basically 67% performance drop. The vanilla score I had in the Resident Evil benchmark was 9,230. DXTORY scored 7,320 points. That's a 23% performance drop compared to the vanilla test, which is a bigger drop compared to the Final Fantasy XIV benchmark. Fraps had a score of 5,051, which is 58% performance drop. It's less of a drop compared to the Final Fantasy benchmark. Action had 6,257, which is a 38% performance drop, which is less as well compared to the Final Fantasy one. BANDICAM scored 6,378, which leads to a 36.5 performance drop. And then we have the MSI burner, which has 4,976, which is a 59% performance drop compared to the vanilla test. That means that DXTORY has by far the best performance of all of these, followed by BANDICAM, and in third place we have Action. Then we have Fraps and MSI. You can basically put them in the same pot because they're in the same level on performance. For the disk space test, I took the video from Resident Evil 6 benchmark, which was 2 minutes and 35 seconds long. DXTORY, without compression, was a file of 17.1 gigabytes. But if we turn on the compression, we get a 8.14 gigabyte file. The compression has a slight loss of image, barely any. It wasn't actually noticeable, so I actually just performed every benchmark test with compression on. Fraps had a file size of 3.77 gigabytes. Action had a file size of 1.43 gigabytes. BANDICAM only had a file size of 390 megabytes. And MSI AFTERBURNER also had a file size of 3.55 gigabytes. And now on to the image quality. I have to say, image quality, like video quality wise, all of them are comparable. They're very high quality, not really much difference in them at all. It all depends on what kind of settings you use and how much quality loss you want in your videos. Now, onto my conclusion is that DXTORY by far is the best performance, but in return, you have to have a lot of disk space, which is not a luxury all people have, compared to BANDICAM that only has a file size of 390 megabytes and a very decent performance rate. If you get Fraps and MSI AFTERBURNER, they're actually comparable. The only difference is that MSI AFTERBURNER is free while Fraps isn't. So if you're considering to get Fraps, I would just get MSI AFTERBURNER because that one is basically free and it has the same performance and file size. Then as last we have Action, which has a pretty good file size. It isn't too big. It could have been smaller compared to BANDICAM, but on performance wise it's not bad. It's somewhere in the middle between DXTORY and Fraps. If you want to see me do more of these benchmarks and compare different softwares with different benchmarks even, leave a comment below and ask and request which software do you want to see tested, and be sure to subscribe and support the channel. Thank you all for watching, and maybe till next time.